Alrighty, this is project 4.1. Got back around to this. Some pretty simple code in here just to get the necessary requirements done. Functionally, what the game has is this sort of randomized shooter, which I will be showing that off. I'll go more into the actual code of how it works. It'll also pull up an array every single time that it is destroyed. The two different objects that it shoots have different arrays. It will also be shooting at different rates. It adds to those arrays, kind of just inserting into them, printing all of them. The circle one is kind of just made so I know for sure that when they get destroyed, it's doing for each correctly, which is why you can see a lot more of the negative stuff because it forms just a random integer for those. Whereas for the other one, it just kind of prints whatever exists already in the array, plus whenever you hit the object, it adds to the array that it hit you, as well as it just got destroyed. They each technically have different words for that, but same functionality. And it, as I already said before, it shoots at a random time. So just over there with its arrow function. Projectile shooter on its own doesn't really have much going on. Actually, it does have quite a bit going on. Blah, 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 blah. And there's the array weapon and sphere array weapon, which the array weapon is just the rectangle, which then I copied over itself with a few little alterations to make the semi-sphere that it shoots. Alright, let's get through this. But kind of just looking at the general code, then I'll go kind of step by step with what was required for the assignment to kind of cover all of that. Alright, first thing, array functions. They all have, well, both the weapons have arrays, which is not the smarter way to go about it, as I found out. If I had the array attached to the projectile shooter instead, it would have constantly kept adding to the array properly, whereas this, you can only add so much before the projectile gets destroyed. And therefore, you really can only add 2 at most, which is why I'll print all 10 of these. Well, all 11 of these, technically. And at most, you can add 2 to that, which is... I kind of needed to prove for myself that it was printing the array fully, which is why I also, at some point, added this random integer thing here, which I will go over more in just a second. For each loops, both the array weapon and sphere array weapon have for each loop just to have you print out all elements of your array, which is just called the hit list. It's attached there. You can see otherwise that you can insert into it with different things, namely when it hits the player, whether it be the sphere array or array weapon, it will add hit player to that. Sphere array adds hurt player, just so there's a little bit of a difference. And they also increase the index number that it technically adds to. Very similar thing for when it gets destroyed, it'll just say object destroyed. In this case, it says object eliminated. For the array weapon, it says object destroyed. Adding that, and then through the sequences, it adds that, and then it goes boop. Time to do the for each loop, and it does it for each one of the index, of course, because it has the hit list attached to it. And it prints out the string variables with a bit of delay at the end. So for randomness, there's quite a decent amount just on the projectile shooter itself. Namely, it has a delay beginning, and it has a random float range with a minimum of 1 second, maximum of 5 seconds for the delay. It also has a random boolean for a branch. True or false, it just makes it shoot one object or the other. You could probably just continue doing that over and over again, or you could just do a random integer to kind of create a more randomized thing if you have more than just the 2 objects. Otherwise than that, there was going to be a kind of a random number set at the end, which would have increased randomly, but it caused an infinite loop situation and wasn't letting me perform that. Otherwise, we do also have just the random integer, which is kind of just was used to prove that things were working correctly. But having a solid number, probably just subtract or add some things, or if damage can increase randomly. More often, you're probably just going to be using an array range, whether it be a range of integer or range of float. They both work very well. The range of floats is probably the most often they'll be used. Otherwise, if you're using a range integer, it'll be kind of doing the same function as what this range boolean is doing. Either it'll be grabbing a random piece of data, or it'll be like a true or false, or oh, this item appears. It's kind of like what spawns an item more than likely. It's just like, oh, randomly this is your loot, so you get either true or false. This thing's here or not because you already picked it up. But if it's random, it wouldn't be doing that. It would just be like maybe it'll appear. It's a small chance, which is why you're probably more likely to use a random integer. Because like on a 1, it'll appear. On then 2 through 99 or 2 through 100, it will not appear. And that is about the extent of it. Just it could be used as a nice little way to kind of create a randomized projectile shooter just to have in a game, which is what I'll be utilizing later in my final. Probably shoot icicles across. This one has a bit of gravity allowed to the projectiles. It will probably not be as much the case for the icicles that are shot later on. Could be cool, just a little obstacle course. The idea initially is just, oh, how many can you get hit by or not get hit by? There would be a bunch of them kind of lined up, and it would kind of do this bullet swarm until you die. And that is it.